Hello, my name is Maurice Washington. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Executive Talk. Those who are watching live and those who are listening later on our podcast, thank you so much for joining us in today's segment. Today, we're going to talk about the shocking link between human resources and also cybersecurity. As a business owner, it's our responsibility to look at all facets of our business. And that is what's majorly important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our guests here that are here to talk about this topic a little bit further. And I have Rick Calloway with me and also Jessica Newman. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring both of them to the stage. How y'all doing?
Good. Good afternoon.
Good. Rick, can you hear me all right? All right. He's working on his audio real quick. He'll be there in a second. So anyway, you're coming with us. Jessica, you're here in Boulder, Colorado. How's business been? How's cybersecurity? Has it been a lot going on this year?
Yeah, it's unfortunately busier than ever. Threat actors around the world don't quit. So,
That's right.
Unfortunately, we have to kind of stay ahead of it and play both offense and defense and try to win.
That's right. And so let me ask you this, Jessica, in your tenure as far as working with cybersecurity, do you feel like business owners put cybersecurity as a top priority within their organization? Do you see that trend, or do you see it kind of in the back end?
I see a lot of business owners worrying about cybersecurity, noting that cybersecurity is a top issue of concern for them. But I think fewer than that number is actually doing something about it. And I think part of that is just, it's complicated, but it's a very evolving landscape. It's very daunting and intimidating if you're a business owner to try to navigate that market. There's thousands of vendors out there. Lots of, technical words being thrown out all the time that, as a layperson, if you're not in IT or tech, you don't really understand what you need or where to start. And so a lot of folks are out there just kind of trying to run their businesses, and they don't really have the time or the bandwidth or the capacity to really know how to best put in a cybersecurity strategy. So lots of worry and maybe less action, not due to laziness, just sort of out of just not knowing how to best get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I understand it, as I see and I read news articles and watch the internet and so on and so forth, you never hear you don't hear about it until it becomes an issue. But other than that, right. Cybersecurity is definitely in the back end. So it doesn't really hit the foreground in business owners' presence every day. So and with that being said, I do appreciate you bringing this up to the forefront to make this a more viable topic. I want to go ahead and talk about some of the things that you want to talk about. So go ahead and break down some of these agenda items that you have for us today, what people will be taking away from today's segment.
Yeah. So ideally, I think what we want to get done today is just really drive home the message that there is a huge link between HR and HR leaders, especially, and cybersecurity. I think in a lot of companies you see, some HR folks kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, that's kind of an IT thing. We'll let the IT folks worry about that.
Right.
And so the message that I want to bring home today is just, I can't exhaust it enough, just how closely linked these folks are on the front. They're truly the front line. And so just want to talk through that and what that looks like and what's at stake and how they can really take action that's really not all that technical or complicated, but take some few steps to make them sort of less attractive as a target than the next one.
All right, so let's talk about this and let's get really dig into some of these points here, because you say with the remote hybrid workforce challenges, there's regulatory and legal compliance. There's also access management, offboarding, phishing, and social engineering. Talk to us about some of the top priorities here and what you see happening the most. I'm sure all these are important for sure.
But yeah, I mean, these are sort of, this is, I guess, a little bit of the battleground, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, but since COVID, really, I mean, we've just moved into such a remote workforce and such a
Right.
digitally forward remote workforce that there's just a much larger attack surface, if you will. And
Yeah.
there's just so many more points of attack that didn't exist before. And so, with as an HR leader, you're managing a remote workforce, you're offboarding, you're onboarding remotely oftentimes. Um, and so, your network and and devices are just there's just more of a blurred boundary between work machines, people using personal emails and personal devices for work. Just a lot to consider from an IT and HR perspective on just managing a remote workforce, and just really attack vectors abound from that. And so,
Right.
phishing, in the bottom right corner there, the phishing and social engineering. I mean, this
Yeah.
is one of the most common methods of attacking a company. And it's really, if you talk to any cybersecurity executive anywhere in the world, they're going to tell you that humans are consistently the weakest link in any sort of cybersecurity strategy.
100%.
And so phishing simulations and really practicing and training an organization and really becoming security first, a culture of security and sort of verifying before you press anything or pay anything or do anything. You want to make sure that the person that you're connecting to is a real person and the right
Yeah.
person. There's just those are the vulnerabilities that we're seeing the most. And so we got to protect against it. And so, yeah, this is just kind of like where we are today. And the regulatory and legal compliance, obviously not every business has to think about that, but many do. I mean, there's SOX certifications, there's HIPAA in the health world. I mean, really,
Right.
there are a ton of industries. If you're transacting, via credit card, there's, a lot of regulatory and legal compliance hoops that you have to jump through and that are really detrimental. If you do experience a breach, you're going to be fined, you're going to be sued, and there's going to be a really large headache there. So just really lots to consider. This is just four,
Right.
but four big ones and just things to be kind of considering as you think about, where are we as a company and what are we doing to protect ourselves?
Exactly.
As far as
go ahead, Rick.
phishing goes, I work with a firm and I use it with a lot of my clients. We send out a fake phishing note to see who clicks on the link and then go back into training. Remember, don't do this. That's how hackers get in. It's the easiest way for them to get in. Somebody lets them in the front door.
Yeah, phishing simulation is a really important strategy to just, keep it in the forefront, keep people sharp. You'd be shocked at how great the social engineering attempts are these days with AI. It used to be really easy to spot the phishing attempts. There'd be typos or
Right.
so maybe language issues or things like that. And now with AI, it's we're sort of fighting AI with AI now. Because it's the trickery is so complex now that you'd be shocked. I mean, I've fallen for it. So it's any of us could fall prey at any moment, which is why practicing and having really specific protocols in place if you do click on something, or if you do make a mistake, you don't want to be in a culture where you're scared to say something or you don't want to get in trouble. So, having an open, safe, security first culture, which is really what HR does, right? HR is kind of the culture setters at a company.
For sure.
And cyber has to be part of that for sure.
Jessica, one thing that I do realize, and I know business owners that we've over the years, and this has been a long time, when computers really became heavily, in use as far as the office space, and now the ultimate convenience, data. I don't think people realize how data heavy they are now, right? So onboarding goes in the computer, your employees goes in the computer, your clients that you work with, their data goes in your computer. If you have an internet, people are inserting their data. So the exposure to cyber attacks is all over the place. And the more, it seems like the more data you have, the more vulnerable you are. Is that correct?
100%. And if you think about, any HR executive, think about the sensitivity of the data that you have when you're hiring people, firing people, managing people. That's all highly sensitive PII. That if leaked, you're then responsible for the reparations from that. And so, that's why, and frankly, that is why HR leaders and HR employees are actually attacked by cyber threat actors at a much higher clip, because they know how sensitive that data is. They're actually specifically targeted because of that data. So, wide range of how sensitive data can be, how valuable it is, what people are, whether it's, extracted or not. But, you're absolutely right that, we're living in a world with much more data. And not only is there much more data, but it's much more highly portable and mobile. There's devices that can carry a lot of data that, which is, again, adds a layer of complexity there, in terms of managing your attack surface.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, take us down this pathway right here. And why is the new cybersecurity battle? Why is HR the new cybersecurity battleground? I'm sorry. So you have global regulations. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I don't want to read the slide, but just a lot of compliance issues and things that businesses now have to think about. I mean, if you have federal contracts, if you have anything in the defense space, a lot of healthcare, a lot of anything credit card or payments, financial institutions. There's just a whole host of really valuable data out there, combined with really strict compliance imperatives that just create a much more sort of complicated landscape that people have to think through as business leaders. And I guess the good news there is there's people out there like us, for example, who can help navigate and kind of sift through that noise. But at the end of the day, there's business on the line here when it comes to winning contracts, or when it comes to, the ramifications of a potential breach, if there is one. And, I just think, from an HR perspective, as we discussed, it's just more digitized now. We're just in such a digitized world. And so, we have to be thinking more strategically and more kind of proactively about what we're doing to protect ourselves.
For sure. And I think one thing I do recognize here, as the media gets a hold of a cyber breach, it goes out to the general public, and that can actually hurt your bottom line in such a big way, because the PR that you have to do in order to handle that is say, hey, we're safe now, come back.
That's exactly right. Yeah. It can be a huge reputational hit. How you handle, a breach is often sort of make or break.
Right.
But yeah, you have to make sure that, you're doing your due diligence to figure out what happened and how to best respond. And that's why, frankly, we advise every single company, regardless of size, if you are internet facing, or if you're transacting any sort of finances online, if you're storing any data, which, I think those three parameters probably encompass like 99% of businesses, right? Today, at least, you need cyber protections in place, but you also especially need cyber insurance. And that is, the cyber insurance, people don't necessarily think about it. It's now becoming a much more, emerging risk line, but we really, really want to make sure that folks have a sufficient standalone cyber insurance policy. It shouldn't just be lumped in with like a
Okay.
business owner's policy. You want full coverage, because if you do experience a breach, then that policy will effectively cover all of the digital forensics, all the reputational harm. It covers all that. So there are experts kind of waiting to step in if there is a breach. And so, that's why, obviously most of us don't know what to do if a breach occurs, but there's plenty of experts out there that do, and you want to make sure that the resources are aligned, that you're in line for those resources if you need them.
Without a doubt. Thank you. So talk to us about this. I know this is a big deal here. So the critical business impacts and also common attack vectors. So you have payroll diversion fraud, 1099 contractor exploits and benefits, portal breaches, and also ransomware.
Yeah, these are just really kind of HR adjacent types of disruptions. Threat actors love to get in there like right during the benefits enrollment windows, or like right around the holidays, for example, like the most inopportune times when everyone is scrambling to elect into their benefits and all of a sudden the system is down. Threat actors want to create that sense of urgency. Like, we're going to throw a ransom at you. And if it's 24 hours before the benefit enrollment deadline, then you're more likely to maybe pay it and just move on and get it done. So, lots of disruption that we see around payroll and benefits systems and processes. And if you think about, just this, both kind of the hard and the soft costs. The hard and it's all good. The hard and soft costs, if you do go down, the sort of the various types of losses that it can occur from business interruption like that. You're talking about, potential revenue, sales, productivity, reputation, data, customer or vendor disappointment, employee disappointment. If employees are trying to elect into their benefits and they're locked out, that's a pretty bad day for any HR leader. So just things to be thinking about in terms of, what do I need to be considering here as an HR leader?
One thing that I ran into, actually a school ran into not too long ago, maybe about a month ago here in Denver, they were victims of ransomware. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is not to just throw something out there, but the cyber crimes are not exclusive to business owners. They're exclusive to anything that functions, right? So they don't mind going even after schools, even elementary schools.
Schools are top targets, frankly.
Yeah.
There's plenty of information and probably very little cyber protection because it's not top of mind. They're thinking schools are operating on shoestring budgets, just trying to get everything done. And all the kids are using laptops. So who's bringing what into the classroom and getting it onto the network? It's a huge opportunity for good old cyber thieves.
Schools experience a ton of breaches left and right every single day. There have been some really massive breaches in the last few years of student data systems. When you think about the HIPAA, privacy there, pretty big when you're talking about like students with learning disabilities and special needs and that data getting leaked. But I think, the reason why, like, I think one of the most important messages to get across here is, most HR folks, most small businesses in general they just think it won't happen to them.
That's exactly
they're like,
right.
we're not MasterCard, we're not Target, we're not MGM, we're not a huge utility that's, critical infrastructure. It doesn't matter. The small and medium-sized businesses are the ones that are getting hit the most right now. And that's because threat actors know that they don't have robust IT security operations. They don't have the time to deal with it. There's that sense of urgency that they just want to resolve it and move on. They're just frankly, it's cyber, what people don't know, what people don't really think about with cyber threat actors is they're really they're criminals of opportunity. They're opportunists. Like they're not, they're not targeting Maurice or Rick. They're not targeting me specifically, unless I'm, the president of the United States or something like that. They're just scanning the neighbor. They're just casing the neighborhood basically.
Yeah.
And they're using
right.
tools, they're using tools to case the neighborhood, and whoever has their front door unlocked or a window that's broken or a security guard who's sleeping on the job, they're going in. So it's really just crimes of opportunity, and the opportunities in small and medium-sized businesses are pretty immense. And so there's some just basic things that you can do to make yourself much less attractive to threat actors. And part of that is just locking your front door, closing your windows, making sure that there are no broken screens, making sure that your security guard is not sleeping on the job. These aren't like, they don't have to be super sophisticated. There doesn't need to be some, crazy, like, FBI security operations center where there's computers everywhere and like some Hollywood scene of tracking threats and things like that. Like, it doesn't have to be overkill. It can be pretty simple, and it can be outsourced really easily. And so something to consider for HR folks.
The hackers don't want to work. I'm a little bit older than the two of you. When hacking first started, they were busy trying to hack into large companies, and they'd spend weeks and days and months and get into the Bank of America or whatever. Now they're going after the easy targets. So why should I work so hard to get this information when I can hit 10 little businesses in a day rather than spend all my time trying to hack into Bank of America? So like you say, they're going after the small, and they're using phishing is their tool, because that's the easiest and most effective for them. Why do I want to try and hack a network when I can get somebody to let me in?
Exactly.
That's exactly right. And speaking of going after the big fish, talk to us about the Coast Guard payroll system breach here. This is one of those examples that you have for us. Give us a little bit of background.
So the Coast Guard, this was recent. This was back in February. This was a payroll system that was breached. Actually it was the second one to happen. There had been one the previous year as well. This one, I think there's another example that we have that I might want to speak to more, but just an example that no one is, no one's immune, right? Even the Coast Guard can get hit. So it's, I believe they got caught by ransomware and had to pay off a ransom if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, just an example of a payroll system. Obviously there's no more urgency, right, than people getting paid, right? Just a prime example of an NHR use case here, where you're just trying to get people paid, you're locked out. That's a bad day, right?
Yes, it is.
There's all these new payroll companies. Do you have any idea how many of them have been hit? Because I see payroll companies popping up left and right, and they've got all of that information, and the employer's supposed to upload this, upload that. The employee, the time cards are done online.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that those payroll companies have really robust cyber insurance to cover themselves in the case that they get hacked, because there's that's kind of when we start talking about third-party vendor supply chain kind of risks. It's like, even someone you do business with can get hit, and that impacts you. And so, yeah, it's happening more and more. I mean, I don't have an example off the top of my head, Rick, but definitely an industry that, again, if you have valuable data, then that's attractive. So, certainly payroll data is one of those types of data.
Let me bring this up because I know Jessica wanted to talk about this. Go ahead and dig in deep on this one, because this one is a pretty huge example here as to how the data breach and how high they're willing to go.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the the RI Bridge breach, right, in Rhode Island. So
Okay.
this is basically like the Medicaid system, I believe, for Rhode
Mm,
Island. So folks trying to elect into coverages for their families, and it of course, I think it happened like the day before Christmas, Christmas Eve. You know, that always, who's
that's right.
that happens often. But this was actually pretty interesting because what happened here is there was um, there was an RFP that went out. There was a third party vendor that had submitted for an RFP, and the threat actor actually somehow got into the RFP, which had talked about its IT infrastructure and what its IT strategy was. And because that RFP was public, they exploited some of that information in order to get into the system. So just kind of we call it kind of OPSEC in the security world, just operational security, very, very relevant to HR. If you put information out into the world, whether it's an RFP or any kind of application for like a federal contract,
Right.
you never know who's going to, you got to understand that it's not just well-intentioned eyes that might be looking at that. And so you don't want to be really divulging, the nuances of your IT infrastructure to the whole world. So,
That's true.
yeah. So, a big breach there. I think over 650,000 people impacted by that
Mm, mm, mm.
that breach. Just kind of and that's people looking for like food stamps and Medicare. It's like
Yeah.
public benefits. Obviously preying on the vulnerable there and taking advantage of timing as well
Yes,
right
that's
around the
right.
holidays. So pretty interesting. It's kind of like CPAs getting hacked right during tax season.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
there are opportune times to get involved.
that's very true. So with that being said, that should be something that you also pay attention to within your business cycle. For a CPA, your time of the year is, January through April. So you might be more vulnerable during that time than the rest of the year. Not to say the rest of the year is not uh, important, because obviously you still have data, but those biggest times of the years are where those opportunities hit. Is that what we're hearing?
Absolutely. And you should be thinking through, if you're a school system, right before school starts or right as school is ending, or right when report cards are due or whatever it is. It is important to be thinking through the nuances of timing in your industry and
Yeah,
think through when you might be attacked and maybe be extra diligent around those times.
makes sense. Okay, good, good. So talk to us about this, training your employees. How would you, what are those human firewalls and organizational security culture? What does that mean in your world? How do you train that infrastructure when it's so robust now? Like you said earlier, when we talk about your average employee system, it's not just in the office anymore.
Right.
Most companies are hiring for remote work, right? So your office is all over the country now.
Right. And there are easy, training your employees or having a culture of cyber awareness is very doable in a remote capacity. So there's plenty of vendors out there. Acrisure Cyber Services partners with a company called Wiser. We use Wiser because it is a platform that anyone can log into from anywhere.
Okay.
It's a very robust curriculum full of kind of shorter videos that are actually interesting and compelling. I mean, I think a lot of people do cybersecurity awareness training and they're just really just checking the box to say that they did it. A lot
Right.
of it is fairly boring. And so people are like, yeah, I did it. Wiser actually makes it fun and memorable, which is why that's the program that we offer our clients. It also includes things like phishing simulation, so that's a really easy thing to deploy through a platform like Wiser. It's just like a learning management system, basically, that really can help a culture be cyber forward and create that kind of frontline resilience that you need.
Got it. That's good. And with that being said, you're talking about onboarding. So take us through that, because onboarding is, I don't know, it happens frequently depending on your size of your company and what you're doing in offboarding. Why is, and I want you to spend a lot more time on offboarding as well, because I know specifically when you offboard, you have your exit interview, you have your protocols, but why is offboarding still something that you should really key in on? Because the employees, they do have your information, right? Because they work there.
Yeah, offboarding is it's a good call out, because it can lead to something that is becoming actually much more prevalent right now, which is something that we call insider threat. So these are people who, you have to think about, why is someone leaving? Are they leaving because they were disgruntled and you just fired them, and it's not a happy parting of ways, or are they parting in a really friendly, kind way? And obviously there's a whole myriad of reasons why someone might leave. But you have to consider that if they're disgruntled, then you do have a risk on your hands in the form of insider threat. And so, protecting your data, protecting your IT, collecting your devices, making sure that nobody has been extracting data to their personal email, making sure that they understand that, they cannot use that information to help competitors, for example. You want to kind of put some systems in place there to make sure that, you're doing what you can to minimize that risk. Are you doing exit interviews? Are you doing data audits? Are you collaborating with as an HR person, are you collaborating? Are you turning off all access to all systems and really auditing, who has access to where at all times? A lot of companies, frankly, they they might not even turn things off. People might retain, for example, email aliases after their job ends. Especially if you think about alumni of universities, right? A lot of people still have their university or alumni email, years or decades after they're a student. So things like that, managing. It's really, you just kind of want to think about it as your business is an attack surface, and you want to figure out where all the holes are, and you want to kind of minimize that attack surface to all extent possible. And that means the people that are coming and going and managing that flow, you have to do that intentionally and strategically, and really dot your I's and cross your T's, so that there aren't these loose chads, if you will, out there that can create problems later on.
So to me, based on what you're saying, if you do it till you offboard, that could be too late, because they've already have the data. They already have this stuff connected within it, possibly. And of course, you want to trust people and trust that they have not gone to that extent. But let's be real. This is a brand new world out here. So does that mean that this company should be doing audits throughout the relationship of having that employee there?
For sure. Yeah. Timely audits, timely revocation of access. So if you're going to be firing somebody, you might want to turn off access before that conversation occurs or during the conversation. Just things like that. That's just basic asset inventory management, right?
Sure.
That in your house, that there's a kitchen table, there's chair, you kind of know what's in your house, and you kind of want to know what's in your business as well. And so, IT audits, and really close collaboration between HR and IT is really critical for those processes to be seamless.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this. So this is also a real story. So tell us about why this is relevant. Obviously, we were talking about employees, but talk to us a little bit further.
Yeah, the reason why I threw this example in there is just as a way of, this is an example of insider threat. Proofpoint is a massive company. They provide all kinds of cybersecurity services and tools. But they had this happen to them where they had a disgruntled employee leave, and that employee went to a competitor and shared competitive information with them. And so really the lesson here is like, this can even happen at a cybersecurity company. And if it can happen at a cybersecurity company, or if it can happen at the Coast Guard or in the Department of Defense or wherever it is, it's just nobody is immune to this stuff. And you cannot think that just because you are an expert in any one thing that you're not vulnerable. And so just kind of I just think that's interesting, right? That,
Yeah.
No one's immune to this stuff.
That's it. Very good. Very good. I hope everybody's getting this, because again, this is the infrastructure, folks. This is the middle ground of your business, and Jessica's showing how deep your cybersecurity goes. Okay, it can get outside of your control fairly quickly. The more employees you have, the more outside of the control of your cybersecurity you have. So just make sure that you guys are paying attention. So you have this point here. So talk to. So while trust is essential in professional settings, it's crucial to verify.
Yeah. So this is, just kind of basic social engineering 101. This is sort of, it's relevant to security awareness training. But obviously you don't want to be that kind of paranoid person that doesn't believe anybody is who they say they are. But you do want to have a healthy level of skepticism. If anybody is asking you to send an a wire to a new address, that's cause for, you want to verify that. You want to get out your like old school Rolodex and look up that person's phone number and call them on the phone and hear their voice say, yes, this is a legit request. Because what's happening in a lot of cases is email is getting compromised. And so
That's right.
People think that they're getting an email from a trusted person, but really it's the threat actor. And threat actor will often change the phone number, for example, or the email address slightly, or whatever it is, the contact information, like in the email signature, they'll change it to be their phone number. So you'll call that, you'll look at the email and say, that's weird. This is a new ACH request. I'm not sure about this. And you'll call the phone number and that person will pretend to be the real person. And they'll say, yes, this is a legit request. I can't tell you how many people have fallen prey to that, to wire fraud. You want to get you want to keep those contacts in a separate record that's not an email, and call the record that you have on file, the contact that you have on file, make sure that is actually the person and verify it. This is truly happening left and right. And so people are losing wires for like $50,000 and up, sometimes several $100,000. So this is kind of like big time important stuff. Like you never, ever want to just trust that somebody is who they say they are.
I'm amazed how many people just send off the money without checking. I had a client that sent off $25,000. The sad thing is it happened 2 weeks after he declined to take the cyber insurance I was offering him.
Oof.
I almost wanted to say I told you so, but I didn't.
Yeah, that's a bad day for sure.
People send off in really big. They'll send like a $250,000 check off to, I got an email from the CEO and he said send money over here, and they just go ahead and do it. I mean, I impress on companies, and I thought, just like you say, verify the old-fashioned way. Pick up the phone and call your bank main number to find out what's going on. But don't just send money. Vendors, your real vendors will probably call you and let you know, hey, we changed banks and we're going to be having you send the money to a new place. They're not going to just send you an email.
It's another reason to have cyber insurance. Frankly, there are cyber insurance carriers out there that have really sophisticated digital forensics teams that can actually work in collaboration with the FBI to claw back a wire that's been sent fraudulently. So it is possible to sometimes get money back, but it's pretty difficult, and it's not guaranteed, and you got to have cyber insurance to even have a chance at that. So far too many people are falling prey to that as we speak right now.
And it doesn't matter how many, it's in the newspaper every day. People see it every day. And like you said, oh, that's never going to happen to me.
Right.
And guess what? Oh.
So let's talk about this incident response report. Talk to us about the incident response, and how does that, work into the whole process and procedure of everything to have this plan? How important is this?
Yeah, this is just if nobody remembers anything from this conversation other than this, I'll be happy about that. But having a strong incident response plan in place and actually communicating and practicing that plan regularly, whether even if it's just once a year, or as part of the onboarding, offboarding training process, it is a really, really critical step for any business to take. If you think of, if anybody who has kids right now in K through 12 schools knows that those kids are unfortunately having to practice lockdown drills, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Emergency management and like what to do in an emergency. And it is the absolute same principle here that an incident response plan will dramatically reduce both the severity and the scale of a cyber event. IBM actually just recently did a study on this, and they found that only 45% of companies have a plan in place, and even fewer than that are actually practicing and updating and talking about their plan. But the reality is companies that have no formal incident response plan in place are going to pay on average 58% more for a breach. So this is just the difference between being prepared and not. Do people know what their roles and responsibilities are? Do you have your insurance broker's phone number and name somewhere else than on your computer if you're locked out? Do you know who to call? Do you know what to do? Who's doing what? It's pretty basic. It doesn't need to be super intense or lengthy. I mean, most incident response plans can be a little bit lengthy, but they don't have to be. And really, any attempt to have these conversations in your workplace is better than not. We actually have an IR template and there are plenty of just free IR templates out there. If you Google it, a lot of carriers will have an IR template that you can access just straight from their website. But let us know if you're interested in that. We can get it to you. We also have basically like a self audit, an IT audit kind of maturity quiz, if you will, that is really helpful. As part of, thinking through just like, where are we as a business? Where are our gaps, and where do we need to be focusing our attention? But, between an IT audit, kind of understanding where you are. I mean, a lot of companies engage in something called pen testing as well. That's like really actively testing your vulnerabilities and essentially trying to penetrate a network to see where there are holes and what needs to be done to kind of shore up the various gaps there. But in lieu of a pen test, which can be costly, even just an incident response plan, it's free. It just takes time to sit around the table and fill it out and get it done. And again, that's really an HR, if there is a breach, that's a very stressful day at a company. It's really on HR to really set the tone. How do we respond? How do we avoid panic? What are our first moves? Who's talking to the press? Who's talking to insurance? These are things that need to be sussed out so that everybody knows what their individual role is. And maybe your role is that you don't have a role, and that's fine. But just really understanding the nuances of that is really the difference. Essentially, it's 50% of the difference of how much you might have to pay. So it's not table stakes here. It's like this is important. And so an IR plan is critical. And I would really strongly suggest that every single business or organization goes through this process.
The first item on this list, can you go back, Maurice?
Oh, sure, of course.
The first item on this list is probably the thing that needs to be impressed on employees when they're onboarded. It's okay if you make a mistake and click on a link. Let somebody know. You're not going to get fined, punished, fired, because if we don't know about it, we can't prevent it. Employees have to be comfortable reporting these things, because that's where the bad actors get in. They get in the front door more often than they get in the back door. And if you click on a link and let them in and don't say anything, then there's bigger problems down the road. But the employees have to be comfortable.
So true. So true. So then, and this is the final point here for us here today. Is there any particular point that stands out more than the others here, Jessica?
I hit on some of these with that previous slide, but I think that the bottom, the top line, if you will, is that HR really plays a critical role in this, and pointed collaboration with IT is really, really important in reducing the potential severity and scale of an attack. And so I just can't stress enough. Most HR folks are not. They don't believe that they're technical. They believe that IT is handled within IT, but there is high level crossover that needs to be discussed and practiced and accounted for in order for any business to be more cyber resilient. And so that's just kind of the top line.
And the HR department is a place where they get hit because that's where all the information is. But HR has to let everyone else know that cyber is important to the company. It's just not IT's problem. It's everybody's problem. And if we get shut down, we can't work. Somebody like me, I'm in sales. If I get shut down and I can't work, I don't get any revenue. And if the company doesn't get any revenue, we're all out on the streets. So it's everybody's problem. It's a financial risk to the company. So you take care of the company can help take care of you.
That's right.
Yeah, it's worth noting that 60% of small and medium-sized businesses that get hit with a cyber attack, they don't exist 6 months afterwards. 60%.
Wow, that's
that big.
It's so how prepared you are and how you handle it. Hard to have a book of insurance business, Rick, right? If they all get hit with a cyber attack and don't exist anymore. So
Right.
This is really an existential risk to our businesses. These, more so I think than flood and fire and other sort of more traditional risks. This is new in our time, in our digital era, and I think just as important as any of those. And I guess just in closing, this common, it's not a myth, but it's some sort of story or quote that I think resonates with me, which is, if a mountain lion's chasing you, you don't have to be faster than the mountain lion. You just need to be faster than the guy running next to you. Obviously, we don't want anyone to get eaten by any lions. But, the reality is that lions are hunting. And if you're the slowest person, then you're going to get it. And so there are just, there are small and what I think fairly affordable steps that a business can take to prevent themselves from getting eaten. And you want to find a really trusted partner. Acrisure is really unique in that we have Acrisure Cyber Services, which we are sort of a full stack end-to-end tech operation that really sifts through this noise and helps our customers evaluate where they are and where there are gaps and how we can layer in, either IT services, general IT services, or cybersecurity services, things like, data backup, or MFA, or cybersecurity awareness training. Like, these are things that we help our clients with all the time. We help them become insurable for cyber insurance. So we know what those underwriters out there are looking for and the key risk controls that they need to be accounting for. So you need to find a trusted partner to help you through this. And there's, thousands of vendors out there. And so if you need help, evaluating a vendor, we can even help you do that. We've got guides and resources to help you determine, all right, you've got an IT vendor out there, great. These are the things they should be doing for you. And this is how you should feel in doing work with that IT vendor. Let's make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. And if you're not, and you want to talk to us, great. But ultimately, our goal is just to make sure that you are covered and that your risks are covered and that you're doing, you're covering your cyber bases, if you will, with insurance and proactive cyber solutions.
For sure.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much for taking us through this pathway. Again, this is one of those things that seems to go in the back end. Even if you see it in the newspaper, you'll see it, you look at it, and you just keep on walking as business as usual, which is unfortunate, but that's a sign that you could possibly be next. And to bring it to our awareness and making sure that it's relevant is huge. So, and thank you for making it applicable and why this is so important, how HR fits into that. So that's a big deal. I want to go ahead and leave a moment for Rick. Do you have any final thoughts you want to give the audience here?
Well, I'm glad I'm faster than the two of you, because you guys can be eaten by the lion. But there's two things that are important. You need to have cyber services protecting your equipment and do training with your employees. And then mistakes happen, so you need to have the cyber insurance to protect you. So physical protection, I guess you'd call it, and insurance protection to take care of your cyber needs, because the hackers are out there and they're perfectly happy to take your information and your money.
Indeed.
And so thank you for that, Rick. And thank you for your continued support and everything that you do, and acknowledging all these different variables that happen within business. And you always have an interesting perspective, considering that you're in business insurance and that you have to look at every last detail and exposure that businesses go through. And this is definitely one of them. So thank you for having assets such as Jessica on your team to talk about these, and Jessica for being there to take the time to talk to us. So we appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right.
See you guys later.
See y'all later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And for my final thoughts, I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of your schedule to listen to what Jessica had to say, and also Rick. This is very important. It's not the most interesting topic. And Jessica would say the same thing. Rick would say the same thing. But it's the most important topic. Your business takes years to develop, but it can take a day to fall. So understand what they're telling you is to keep you here, to keep you complete, to keep your business and keep your employees fed, to keep that operation going that you work so hard for. And this is why we want to take the time to bring things like this to your awareness, to take that next moment, that next step, to make calls to get your cybersecurity in line, to talk to your HR department to say, hey, this is something that you need to look at. Help us out. Help this infrastructure stay strong. So this is why we bring information like this to your attention, to make sure that you have the partners at your disposal. If you need to reach out to Jessica or Rick, you can reach out to me and I can get you connected, or their information is up here and I'll leave it up there for everybody to get connected to. But in the meantime, Rick, Jessica, and myself, we all have to get back to work. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.